Hippolytus, Refutation of All Heresies, Book 4. But in each zodiacal sign they call limits of the stars those in which each of the stars from any one quarter to another can exert the greatest amount of influence, in regard of which there is among them, according to their writings, no mere casual divergency of opinion. But they say that the stars are attended as if by satellites when they are in the midst of other stars, in continuity with the signs of the zodiac, as if when any particular star may have occupied the first portions of the same sign in the zodiac, and another the last, and another those portions in the middle, that which is in the middle is said to be guarded by those holding the portions at the extremities, and they are said to look upon one another, and to be in conjunction with one another, as if appearing in a triangular or quadrangular figure. They assume, therefore, the figure of a triangle, and look upon one another, which have an intervening distance extending for 3 zodiacal signs, and they assume the figure of a square, those which have an interval extending for 2 signs. But as the underlying parts sympathize with the head, and the head with the underlying parts, so also things terrestrial with superlunar objects. But there is of these a certain difference and want of sympathy, so that they do not involve one and the same point of juncture. Employing these as analogies, Euphrates the Paratic and Acambes the Charistian, and the rest of the crowd of these speculators imposing names different from the doctrine of the truth, speak of a sedition of Aeons, and of a revolt of good powers over to evil ones, and of the concord of good with wicked Aeons, calling them toparchai and proastioi, and many other names. But the entire of this heresy, as attempted by them, I shall explain and refute when we come to treat of the subject of these Aeons. But now, lest anyone suppose the opinions propounded by the Chaldeans respecting astrological doctrine to be trustworthy and secure, we shall not hesitate to furnish a brief refutation respecting these, establishing that the futile art is calculated both to deceive and blind the soul indulging in vain expectations rather than to profit it. And we urge our case with these, not according to any experience of the art, but from knowledge based on practical principles. Those who have cultivated the art, becoming disciples of the Chaldeans, and communicating mysteries as if strange and astonishing to men, having changed the names merely, have from this source concocted their heresy. But since, estimating the astrological art as the powerful one, and availing themselves of the testimonies adduced by its patrons, they wish to gain reliance for their own attempted conclusions, we shall at present, as it has seemed expedient, prove the astrological art to be untenable, as our intention next is to invalidate also the Paratic system as a branch growing out of an unstable root. The originating principle, and as it were, foundation of the entire art, is fixing the horoscope, for from this are derived the rest of the cardinal points, as well as the declinations and ascensions, the triangles and squares, and the configurations of the stars in accordance with these, and from all these the predictions are taken. Whence, if the horoscope be removed, it necessarily follows that neither any celestial object is recognizable in the meridian, or at the horizon, or in the point of the heavens opposite the meridian. But if these be not comprehended, the entire system of the Chaldeans vanishes along with them, but that the sign of the horoscope is indiscoverable by them, we may show by a variety of arguments. For in order that this horoscope may be found, it is first requisite that the time of birth of the person falling under inspection should be firmly fixed, and secondly, that the horoscope, which is to signify this, should be infallible, and thirdly, that the ascension of the zodiacal sign should be observed with accuracy. For from the moment of birth, the ascension of the zodiacal sign rising in the heaven should be closely watched, since the Chaldeans, determining from this the horoscope, frame the configuration of the stars in accordance with the ascension of the sign, and they term this disposition, in accordance with which they devise their predictions. But neither is it possible to take the birth of persons falling under consideration, as I shall explain, nor is the horoscope infallible, nor is the rising zodiacal sign apprehended with accuracy. How it is, then, that the system of the Chaldeans is unstable, let us now declare. Having then previously marked it out for investigation, they draw the birth of persons falling under consideration from unquestionably the depositing of the seed, and from conception or parturition. And if one will attempt to take the horoscope from conception, the accurate account of this is incomprehensible, the time occupied passing quickly and naturally so. For we are not able to say whether conception takes place upon the transference of the seed or not, for this can happen even as quick as thought, just also as leaven, when put into heated jars, immediately is reduced to a glutinous state. But conception can also take place after a lapse of duration. For there being an interval from the mouth of the womb to the fundament, where physicians say conceptions take place, it is altogether the nature of the seed deposited to occupy some time in traversing this interval. The Chaldeans, therefore, being ignorant of the quantity of duration to a nicety, never will comprehend the moment of conception, the seed at one time being injected straight forward, and falling at one spot upon actual parts of the womb well disposed for conception, and at another time dropping into it dispersedly, and being collected into one place by uterine energies. Now, while these matters are unknown, namely, as to when the first takes place, and when the second, and how much time is spent in that particular conception, and how much in this, while I say ignorance on these points prevails on the part of these astrologers, an accurate comprehension of conception is put out of the question. And if, as some natural philosophers have asserted, the seed remaining stationary first, and undergoing alteration in the womb, then enters the womb's opened blood vessels, as the seed of the earth sink into the ground, from this it will follow that those who are not acquainted with the quantity of time occupied by the change will not be aware of the precise moment of conception either. And moreover, as women differ from one another in the other parts of the body, both as regards energy and in other respects, so also it is reasonable to suppose that they differ from one another in respect of energy of womb, some conceiving quicker and others slower. And this is not strange, since also women, when themselves compared with themselves, at times are observed having a strong disposition towards conception, but at times with no such tendencies. And when this is so, it is impossible to say with accuracy when the deposited seed coalesces, in order that from this time the Chaldeans may fix the horoscope of the birth. For this reason, it is impossible to fix the horoscope from the period of conception, but neither can this be done from that of birth. For in that first place there exists the difficulty as to when it can be declared that there is a birth, whether it is when the fetus begins to incline towards the orifice, or when it may project a little, and when it may be borne to the ground. Neither is it in each of these cases possible to comprehend the precise moment of parturition, or to define the time, for also, on account of disposition of soul, and on account of suitableness of body, and on account of choice of the parts, and on account of experience in the midwife, and in other endless causes, the time is not the same at which the fetus inclines towards the orifice, when the membranes are ruptured, or when it projects a little, or is deposited on the ground. But the period is different in the case of different individuals, and when the Chaldeans are not able definitely and accurately to calculate this, they will fail, as they ought, to determine the period of emergence. That, then, the Chaldeans profess to be acquainted with the horoscope at the periods of birth, but in reality do not know it, is evident from these considerations. But that neither is their horoscope infallible, it is easy to conclude, for when they allege that the person sitting beside the woman in travail at the time of parturition gives, by striking a metallic rim, a sign to the Chaldean, who from an elevated place is contemplating the stars, and he, looking towards heaven, marks down the rising zodiacal sign, in the first place we shall prove to them that when parturition happens indefinitely, as we have shown a little before, neither is it easy to signify this birth by striking the metallic rim. However, grant that the birth is comprehensible, yet neither is it possible to signify this at the exact time, for as the noise of the metallic plate is capable of being divided by a longer time and one protracted in reference to perception, it happens that the sound is carried to the height with proportionate delay. And the following proof may be observed in the case of those felling timber at a distance for a sufficiently long time after the descent of the axe, and the sound of the stroke is heard, so that it takes a longer time to reach the listener. And for this reason, therefore, it is not plausible that the Chaldeans accurately to take the time of the rising zodiacal sign, and consequently the time when one can make the horoscope with truth. And not only does more time seem to elapse after parturition, when he who is sitting beside the woman in labor strikes the metallic plate, and next, after the sound reaches the listener, that is, the person who has gone up to the elevated position, but also while he is glancing around and looking to ascertain in which of the zodiacal signs is the moon, and in which appears each of the rest of the stars, it necessarily follows that there is a different position in regard of the stars, the motion of the pole whiffing them on with incalculable velocity, before what is seen in the heavens is carefully adjusted to the moment when the person is born. In this way, the art practiced by the Chaldeans will be shown to be unstable. Should anyone, however, allege that by questions put to him who inquires from the Chaldeans the birth can be ascertained, not even by this plan is it possible to arrive at the precise period. For if supposing any such attention on their part in reverence to their art to be on record, even these do not attain, as we have proved, unto accuracy either, how, we ask, can an unsophisticated individual comprehend precisely the time of parturition, in order that the Chaldean, acquiring the requisite information from this person, may set the horoscope correctly? But neither from the appearance of the horizon will the rising star seem the same everywhere, but in one place its declination will be supposed to be the horoscope, and in another the ascension will be thought the horoscope, according as the places come into view, being either lower or higher. Wherefore also from this quarter an accurate prediction will not appear, since many may be born throughout the entire world at the same hour, each from a different direction observing the stars. But the supposed comprehension of the period of parturition by means of clepsydrus is likewise futile. For the contents of the jar will not flow out at the same time when it is full as when it is half empty, yet, according to their own account, the pole itself by a single impulse is whiffed along at an equable velocity. If, however, evading the argument, they should affirm that they do not take the time precisely, but as it happens in any particular latitude, they will be refuted almost by the sidereal influences themselves. For those who have been born at the same time do not spend the same life, but some, for example, have been made kings, and others have grown old in fetters. There has been born none equal, at all events, to Alexander the Macedonian, though many were brought forth along with him throughout the earth, and none equal to the philosopher Plato. Wherefore the Chaldean, examining the time of the birth in any particular latitude, will not be able to say accurately whether a person born at this time will be prosperous. Many, I take it, born at this time have been unfortunate, so that the similarity according to dispositions is futile. Having then, by different reasons and various methods, refuted the ineffectual mode of examination adopted by the Chaldeans, neither shall we omit this, namely to show that their predictions will eventuate in explicable difficulties. For if, as the mathematics assert, it is necessary that one born under the barb of Sagittarius's arrow should meet with a violent death, how was it that so many myriads of the barbarians that fought with the Greeks at Marathon or Salamis were simultaneously slaughtered? For unquestionably there was not the same horoscope in the case, at all events, of them all. And again, it is said that one born under the urn of Aquarius will suffer shipwreck. Yet how is it that so many of the Greeks that returned from Troy were overwhelmed in the deep around the indented shores of Euboea? But it is incredible that all, distant from one another by a long interval of duration, should have been born under the urn of Aquarius. For it is not reasonable to say that frequently, for those whose fate it was to be destroyed in the sea, all who were with them in the same vessel should perish. Why should the doom of this man subdue the destinies of all? Nay, but why, on account of one for whom it was allotted to die on land, should not all be preserved? But since also they frame an account concerning the action of the zodiacal signs, to which they say the creatures that are procreated are assimilated, neither shall we omit this. As for instance, that one born in Leo will be brave, and that one born in Virgo will have long straight hair, be of a fair complexion, childless, modest. These statements, however, and others similar to them, are rather deserving of laughter than serious consideration. For according to them, it is possible for no Ethiopian to be born in Virgo, otherwise he would allow that such a one is white, with long straight hair and the rest. But I am rather of opinion that the ancients imposed the names of received animals upon certain specified stars for the purpose of knowing them better, not from any similarity of nature. For what have the 7 stars, distant one from another, in common with a bear, or the 5 stars with the head of a dragon, in regard of which Aeschylus says, "But 2 his temples, and 2 his eyes, and 1 beneath reaches the end of the huge monster's jaw." In this manner also, that these points are not deserving so much labor is evident to those who prefer to think correctly, and do not attend to the bombast of the Chaldeans, who consign monarchs to utter obscurity by perfecting cowardice in them, and rouse private individuals to dare great exploits. But if anyone surrendering himself to evil is guilty of delinquency, he who has been thus deceived does not become a teacher to all whom the Chaldeans are disposed to mislead by their mistakes. Far from it. These astrologers impel the minds of their dupes, as they would have them, into endless perturbation, when they affirm that a configuration of the same stars could not return to a similar position, otherwise than by the renewal of the great year through a space of 7,777 years. How then, I ask, will human observation for one birth be able to harmonize with so many ages? And this not once, but oftentimes, when a destruction of the world, as some have stated, would intercept the progress of this great year, or a terrestrial convulsion, though partial, would utterly break the continuity of the historical tradition. The Chaldaic art must necessarily be refuted by a greater number of arguments, although we have been reminding our readers of it on account of other circumstances, not peculiarly on account of the art itself. Since, however, we have determined to omit none of the opinions advanced by Gentile philosophers on account of the notorious knavery of the heretics, let us see what they also say who have attempted to propound doctrines concerning magnitudes, who, observing the fruitless labor of the majority of speculators, where each after a different fashion coined his own falsehoods and attained celebrity, have ventured to make some greater assertion in order that they might be highly magnified by those who mightily extol their contemptible lies. These suppose the existence of circles and measures and triangles and squares, both in twofold and threefold array. Their argumentation, however, in regard of this matter is extensive, yet it is not necessary in reference to the subject which we have taken in hand. I reckon it then sufficient to declare the prodigies detailed by these men. Wherefore, employing condensed accounts of what they affirm, I shall turn my attention to the other points that remain to be considered. Now they make the following statements. The Creator communicated preeminent power to the orbital motion of the identical and similar circle, for he permitted the revolution of it to be one and indivisible, but after dividing this internally into 6 parts, and thus having formed 7 unequal circles, according to each interval of a twofold and threefold dimension, he commanded, since there were three of each, that the circles should travel in orbits contrary to one another, three indeed, out of the aggregate of 7, being whirled along with equal velocity, and 4 of them with a speed dissimilar to each other and to the remaining 3, yet all according to a definite principle. For he affirms that the mastery was communicated to the orbital motion of the same circle, not only since it embraces the motion of the other, that is, the erratic stars, but because also it possesses so great mastery, that is, so great power, that even it leads round along with itself by a peculiar strength of its own those heavenly bodies, that is, the erratic stars, that are whirled along in contrary directions from west to east, and in like manner from east to west. And he asserts that this motion was allowed to be one and indivisible in the first place, inasmuch as the revolutions of all the fixed stars were accomplished in equal periods of time, and were not distinguished according to greater or less portions of duration. In the next place, they all present the same phase as that which belongs to the outermost motion, whereas the erratic stars have been distributed into greater and varying periods for the accomplishment of their movements, and into unequal distances from earth. And he asserts that this motion was allowed to be one and indivisible in the first place, inasmuch as the revolutions of all the fixed stars were accomplished in equal periods of time, and were not distinguished according to greater or less portions of duration. In the next place, they all present the same phase as that which belongs to the outermost motion, whereas the erratic stars have been distributed into greater and varying periods for the accomplishment of their movements, and into unequal distances from earth. And he asserts that the motion in 6 parts of the other has been distributed probably into 7 circles. For as many as are sections of each circle, I allude to monads of the sections, become segments. For example, if the division be by 1 section, there will be 2 segments. If by 2, 3 segments, and so if anything be cut into 6 parts, there will be 7 segments. And he says that the distances of these are alternately arranged both in double and triple order, there being 3 of each, a principle which he has attempted to prove holds good of the composition of the soul likewise, and depending upon the 7 numbers. For among them there are from the monad 3 double numbers, that is to say 2, 4, 8, and 3 triple ones, that is 3, 9, 27. But the diameter of Earth is 80,108 stadii, and the perimeter of Earth 250,543 stadii, and the distance also from the surface of the Earth to the lunar circle, Aristarchus the Samian computes at 8,178 stadii, but Apollonius 5,000,000, whereas Archimedes computes it at 5,544,130. And from the lunar to solar circle, according to the last authority, are 50,262,065 stadii, and from this to the circle of Venus 20,272,065 stadii, and from this to the circle of Mercury 50,817,165 stadia, and from this to the circle of Mars, 40,541,108 stadia, and from this to the circle of Jupiter, 20,275,065 stadia, and from this to the circle of Saturn, 40,372,065 stadia, and from this to the zodiac and the farthest periphery, 20,082,005 stadia. The mutual distances of the circles and spheres and the depths are rendered by Archimedes. He takes the perimeter of the zodiac at 447,310,000 stadia, so that it follows that a straight line from the center of the earth to the most outward superficies would be the sixth of the aforesaid number, but that the line from the surface of the earth on which we tread to the zodiac would be a sixth of the aforesaid number, less by 4 myriads of stadia, which is the distance from the center of the earth to its surface. And from the circle of Saturn to the earth, he says the distance is 2,226,912,711 stadia, and from the circle of Jupiter to earth, 502,770,646 stadia, and from the circle of Mars to earth, 132,418,581, from the sun to earth, 121,604,454, and from Mercury to the earth, 526,882,259, and from Venus to earth, 50,815,160. Concerning the moon, however, a statement has been previously made. The distances and profundities of the spheres Archimedes thus renders, but a different declaration regarding them has been made by Hipparchus, and a different one still by Apollonius, the mathematician. It is sufficient, however, for us, following the Platonic opinion, to suppose twofold and threefold distances from one another of the erratic stars, for the doctrine is thus preserved of the composition of the universe out of harmony on concordant principles in keeping with these distances. The numbers, however, advanced by Archimedes, and the accounts rendered by the rest concerning the distances, if they be not on principles of symphony, that is, the double and triple distances spoken of by Plato, but are discovered independent of harmonies, would not preserve the doctrine of the formation of the universe according to harmony. For it is neither credible nor possible that the distances of these should be both contrary to some reasonable plan and independent of harmonious and proportional principles, except perhaps only the moon, on account of wanings and the shadow of the earth, in regard also of the distance of which alone, that is, the lunar planet, from earth, one may trust Archimedes. It will, however, be easy for those who, according to the Platonic dogma itself, adopt this distance to comprehend by numerical calculation intervals according to what is double and triple, as Plato requires, and the rest of the distances. If then, according to Archimedes, the moon is distant from the surface of the earth 5,544,130 stadia, by increasing these numbers, double and triple, it will be easy to find also the distances of the rest, as if subtracting one part of the number of stadia, which the moon is distant from the earth. But because the rest of the numbers, those alleged by Archimedes concerning the distance of the erratic stars, are not based on principles of concord, it is easy to understand, that is, for those who attend to the matter, how the numbers are mutually related, and on what principles they depend. That, however, they should not be in harmony and symphony. I mean those that are parts of the world which consist according to harmony. This is impossible. Since, therefore, the first number which the moon is distant from the earth is 5,544,130, the second number which the sun is distant from the moon being 50,272,065 subsists by a greater computation than ninefold. But the higher number in reference to this, being 20,272,065, is comprised in a greater computation than half. The number, however, superior to this, which is 50,817,165, is contained in a greater computation than half. But the number superior to this, which is 40,541,108, is contained in a less computation than 2/5. But the number superior to this, which is 20,275,065, is contained in a greater computation than half. The final number, however, which is 40,372,065, is comprised in a less computation than double. These numerical relations, therefore, the greater than ninefold, and less than half, and greater than double, and less than 2/5, and greater than half, and less than double, are beyond all symphonies, from which not any proportionate or harmonic system could be produced. But the whole world and the parts of it are in all respects similarly framed in conformity with proportion and harmony. The proportionate and harmonic relations, however, are preserved, as we have previously stated, by double and triple intervals. If, therefore, we consider Archimedes reliable in the case of only the first distance, that from the moon to the earth, it is easy also to find the rest of the intervals by multiplying them by double and triple. Let then the distance, according to Archimedes, from earth to moon be 5,544,130 stadii. There will therefore be the double number of this of stadii which the sun is distant from the moon, that is to say, 11,088,260. But the sun is distant from the earth 16,632,390 stadii, and Venus is likewise distant from the sun 16,632,390 stadii, but from the earth 33,264,780 stadii, and Mercury is distant from Venus 22,176,520 stadii, but from earth 55,441,300 stadii, and Mars is distant from Mercury 49,897,170 stadii, and from Earth 105,338,470 stadii, and Jupiter is distant from Mars 44,353,040 stadii, but from Earth 149,691,510 stadii. Saturn is distant from Jupiter 149,691,510 stadia, but from Earth 299,383,020 stadia. Who will not feel astonishment at the exertion of so much deep thought with so much toil? This Ptolemy, however, a careful investigator of these matters, does not seem to me to be useless, but only this would grieve one, that being recently born he could not be of service to the sons of the giants, who being ignorant of these measures, supposing that the heights of heaven were near, endeavored in vain to construct a tower. And so, if at that time he were present to explain to them these measures, they would not have made the daring attempt ineffectually. But if anyone profess not to have confidence in this astronomer's calculations, let him by measuring be persuaded of their accuracy. For in reference to those incredulous on the point, one cannot have a more manifest proof than this. O pride of vain toiling soul, and incredible belief that Ptolemy should be considered preeminently wise among those who have cultivated similar wisdom. Certain adhering partly to these, as if having propounded great conclusions, and supposed things worthy of reason, have framed enormous and endless heresies. And one of these is Colarbasus, who attempts to explain religion by measures and numbers. And others there are, who act in like manner, whose tenets we shall explain when we commence to speak of what concerns those who give heed to Pythagorean calculations as possible, and uttering vain prophecies, hastily assume as secure the philosophy by numbers and elements. Now certain speculators, appropriating similar reasonings from these, deceive unsophisticated individuals, alleging themselves endued with foresight, sometimes after uttering many predictions, happening on a single fulfillment, and not abashed by many failures, but making their boast in this one. Neither shall I pass over the witless philosophy of these men, but after explaining it, I shall prove that those who attempt to form a system of religion out of these aforesaid elements are disciples of a school weak and full of knavery. Those, then, who suppose that they prophesy by means of calculations and numbers and elements and names, constitute the origin of their attempted system to be as follows. They affirm that there is a root of each of the numbers, in the case of thousands, so many monads as there are thousands. For example, the root of 6,000, 6 monads, and 7,000, 7 monads, and 8,000, 8 monads, and in the case of the rest in like manner according to the same proportion. And in the case of hundreds, as many hundreds as there are, so many monads are the root of them. For instance, of 700 there are 7 hundreds. The root of these is 7 monads. Of 600, 6 hundreds. The root of these, 6 monads. And it is similar respecting decades. For of 80, the root is 8 monads. And of 60, 6 monads, and 40, 4 monads. Of 10, 1 monad. And in the case of monads, the monads themselves are a root. For instance, of 9, 9, of 8, 8, of 7, 7. In this way also ought we therefore to act in the case of the elements of words, for each letter has been arranged according to a certain number. For instance, the letter N according to 50 monads. But of 50 monads, 5 is the root, and the root of the letter N is therefore 5. Grant that from some name we take certain roots of it. For instance, from the name Agamemnon, there is the A, 1 monad, and of the G, 3 monads, and of the other A, 1 monad, of the M, 4 monads, of the E, 5 monads, of the M, 4 monads, of the N, 5 monads, of the long O, 8 monads, of the N, 5 monads, which brought together into one series will be 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4, 5, 8, 5. And these, added together, make up 36 monads. Again, they take the roots of these. They become 3 in the case of the number 30, but actually 6 in the case of the number 6. 3 and the 6, then added together, constitute 9. But the root of 9 is 9. Therefore, the name Agamemnon terminates in the root 9. Let us do the same with another name, Hector. The name Hector has 5 letters, A and K and T and O and R. The roots of these are 5, 2, 3, 8, 1, and these added together make up 19 monads. Again, of the 10, the root is 1, and of the 9, 9, which added together make up 10. The root of 10 is a monad. The name Hector, therefore, when made the subject of computation, has formed a root, namely a monad. It would, however, be easier to conduct the calculation thus. Divide the ascertained roots from the letters. And now, in the case of the name Hector, we have found 19 monads into 9, and treat what remains as roots. For example, if I divide 19 into 9, the remainder is 1, for 9 times 2 are 18, and there is a remaining monad. For if I subtract 18 from 19, there is a remaining monad, so that the root of the name Hector will be a monad. Again, of the name Patroclus, these numbers are roots, 813, 172, 372. Added together, they make up 34 monads, and of these the remainder is 7 monads. Of the 30, 3, and of the 4, 4. 7 monads, therefore, are the root of the name Patroclus. Those, then, that conduct their calculations according to the rule of the number 9, take the 9th part of the aggregate number of roots, and define what is left over as the sum of the roots. They, on the other hand, who conduct their calculations according to the rule of the number 7, take the 7th part of the aggregate number of roots. For example, in the case of the name Patroclus, the aggregate in the matter of the roots is 34 monads. This divided into 7 parts makes 4, which multiplied into each other are 28. There are 6 remaining monads, so that a person using this method says, according to the rule of the number 7, that 6 monads are the root of the name Patroclus. If, however, it be 43, 6 taken 7 times, he says are 42, for 7 times 6 are 42, and 1 is the remainder. A monad, therefore, is the root of the number 43, according to the rule of the number 7. But one ought to observe if the assumed number, when divided, has no remainder. For example, if from any name, having added together the roots, I find, to give an instance, 36 monads, but the number 36 divided into 9 makes exactly 4 aniad, for 9 times 4 are 36, and nothing is over. It is evident, then, that the actual root is 9. And again, dividing the number 45, we find 9 and nothing over. For 9 times 5 are 45, and nothing remains. Wherefore, in the case of such, they assert the root itself to be 9. And as regards the number 7, the case is similar. If, for example, we divide 28 into 7, we have nothing over. For 7 times 4 are 28, and nothing remains, wherefore they say that 7 is the root. But when one computes names, and finds the same letter occurring twice, he calculates it once. For instance, the name Patroclus has the pa twice and the o twice. They therefore calculate the a once and the o once. According to this, then, the roots will be 81317232, and added together they make 27 monads. And the root of the name will be according to the rule of the number 9, 9 itself, but according to the rule of the number 7, 6. In like manner, the name Sarpedon, when made the subject of calculation, produces as a root, according to the rule of the number 9, 2 monads. Patroclus, however, produces 9 monads. Patroclus gains victory, but when one number is uneven, but the other even, the uneven number, if it is larger, prevails. But again, when there is an even number, 8, and 5, an uneven number, the 8 prevails, for it is larger. If, however, there were 2 numbers, for example, both of them even, and both of them odd, the same prevails. But how does the name Sarpedon, according to the rule of the number 9, make 2 monads, since the long letter O is omitted? For when there may be in a name the long letter O and long E, they leave out the long E as one letter, because they say both are equipollent, and the same must not be computed twice over, as has been above declared. Again, the name Ajax makes 4 monads, but the name Hector, according to the rule of the 9th number, makes 1 monad, and the tetrad is even, whereas the monad odd, and in the case of such, we say, the greater prevails. Ajax gains the victory. Again, Alexander and Menelaus may be adduced as examples. Alexander has a proper name, Paris. But Paris, according to the rule of the number 9, makes 4 monads, and Menelaus, according to the rule of the number 9, makes 9 monads. The 9, however, conquer the 4 monads. For it has been declared, when the one number is odd and the other even, the greater prevails. But when both are even or both odd, the less prevails. Again, Amycus and Polydeuces may be adduced as examples. Amycus, according to the rule of the number 9, makes 2 monads, and Polydeuces, however, 7. Polydeuces gains the victory. Ajax and Ulysses contended at the funeral games. Ajax, according to the rule of the number 9, makes 4 monads. Ulysses, according to the rule of the number 9, makes 8. Is there then not any annexed? And is there not a proper name for Ulysses? For he has gained the victory. According to the numbers, no doubt, Ajax is victorious, but history hands down the name of Ulysses as the conqueror. Achilles and Hector may be adduced as examples. Achilles, according to the rule of the number 9, makes 4 monads. Hector, 1. Achilles gains the victory. Again, Achilles and Asteropaeus are instances. Achilles makes 4 monads. Asteropaeus, 3. Achilles conquers. Again, Menelaus and Euphorbus may be adduced as examples. Menelaus has 9 monads. Euphorbus 8, Menelaus gains the victory. Some, however, according to the rule of the number 7, employ the vowels only, but others distinguish by themselves the vowels, and by themselves the semi-vowels, and by themselves the mutes, and having formed 3 orders, they take the roots by themselves of the vowels, and by themselves of the semi-vowels, and by themselves of the mutes, and they compare each apart. Others, however, do not employ even these customary numbers, but different ones. For instance, as an example, they do not wish to allow that the letter P has as a root 8 monads but 5, and that the letter psi has a root of 4 monads, and turning in every direction, they discover nothing sound. When, however, they contend about the second letter from each name, they take away the first letter, and when they contend about the third letter, they take away 2 letters of each name, and calculating the rest, compare them. I think that there has been clearly expounded the mind of arithmeticians, who, by means of numbers and of names, suppose that they interpret life. Now, I perceive that these, enjoying leisure and being trained in calculation, have been desirous that, through the art delivered to them from childhood, they, acquiring celebrity, should be styled prophets. And they, measuring the letters up and down, have wandered into trifling. For if they fail, they say, in putting forward the difficulty, perhaps this name was not a family one, but imposed. As also, lighting in the instance, they argue in the case of the names Ulysses and Ajax. Who, taking occasion from this astonishing philosophy, and desirous of being styled heresiarch, will not be extolled. But since also there is another, more profound art among the all-wise speculators of the Greeks, to whom heretical individuals boast that they attach themselves as disciples on account of their employing the opinions of these ancient philosophers in reference to the doctrines tempted to be established by themselves, as shall a little afterwards be proved. But this is an art of divination by examination of the forehead, or rather, I should say, it is madness. Yet we shall not be silent as regards this system. There are some who ascribe to the stars figures that mold the ideas and dispositions of men, assigning the reason of this to births that have taken place under particular stars. They thus express themselves: those who are born under Aries will be of the following kind: long head, red hair, contracted eyebrows, pointed forehead, eyes gray and lively, drawn cheeks, long-nosed, expanded nostrils, thin lips, tapering chin, wide mouth. These, he says, will partake in the following nature: cautious, subtle, perspicuous, prudent, indulgent, gentle, over-anxious, persons of secret resolves fitted for every undertaking, prevailing more by prudence than strength, deriders for the time being, scholars, trustworthy, contentious, quarrellers in a fray, concupiscent, inflamed with unnatural lust, reflective, estranged from their own homes, giving dissatisfaction in everything, accusers like madmen in their cups, scorners, year by year losing something serviceable in friendship through goodness. They, in the majority of cases, end their days in a foreign land. Those, however, who are born in Taurus will be of the following description: round head, thick hair, broad forehead, square eyes, and large black eyebrows. In a white man, thin veins, sanguine, long eyelids, coarse, huge ears, round mouths, thick nose, round nostrils, thick lips, strong in the upper parts, formed straight from the legs. The same are by nature pleasing, reflective, of a goodly disposition, devout, just, uncouth, complacent, laborers from 12 years, quarrelsome, dull. The stomach of these is small. They are quickly filled, forming many designs, prudent, niggardly towards themselves, liberal towards others. Beneficent, of a slow body, they are partly sorrowful, heedless as regard friendship, useful on account of mind, unfortunate. Those who are born in Gemini will be of the following description: red countenance, size not very large, evenly proportioned limbs, black eyes as if anointed with oil, cheeks turned down, and large mouth, contracted eyebrows. They conquer all things. They retain whatever possessions they acquire. They are extremely rich, pernicious, niggardly of what is peculiarly their own, profuse in the pleasures of women, equitable, musical, liars, and the same by nature are learned, reflective, inquisitive, arriving at their own decisions, concupiscent, sparing of what belongs to themselves, liberal, quiet, prudent, crafty. They form many designs, calculators, accusers, importunate, not prosperous. They are beloved by the fair sex, merchants, as regards friendship, not to any considerable extent useful. Those born in Cancer are of the following description: size not large, hair like a dog, of a reddish color, small mouth, round head, pointed forehead, gray eyes, sufficiently beautiful, limbs somewhat varying. The same by nature are wicked, crafty, proficients in plans, insatiable, stingy, ungracious, illiberal, useless, forgetful. They neither restore what is another's, nor do they ask back what is their own. As regards friendship, useful. Those born in Leo are of the following description: round head, reddish hair, huge wrinkled forehead, coarse ears, large development of neck, partly bald, red complexion, gray eyes, large jaws, coarse mouth, gross in the upper parts, huge breast, the underlimbs tapering. The same are by nature persons who allow nothing to interfere with their own decision, pleasing themselves, irascible, passionate, scorners, obstinate, forming no design, not loquacious, indolent, making an improper use of leisure, familiar, wholly abandoned to pleasures of women, adulterers, immodest, in faith untrue, importunate, daring, penurious, spoliators. Remarkable, as regards fellowship, useful, as regards friendship, useless. Those born in Virgo are of the following description: fair appearance, eyes not large, fascinating, dark, compact eyebrows, cheerful, swimmers. They are, however, slight in frame, beautiful in aspect, with hair prettily adjusted, large forehead, prominent nose. The same by nature are docile, moderate, intelligent, sportive, rational, slow to speak, forming many plans, in regard of a favor, importunate, gladly observing everything, and well-disposed pupils. They master whatever they learn. Moderate, scorners, victims of unnatural lusts. Companionable, of a noble soul, despisers. Careless in practical matters, attending to instruction, more honorable in what concerns others than what relates to themselves. As regards friendship, useful. Those born in Libra will be of the following description: hair thin, drooping, reddish and longish, forehead pointed and wrinkled, fair, compact eyebrows, beautiful eyes, dark pupils, long, thin ears, head inclined, wide mouth. The same by nature are intelligent, God-fearing, communicative to one another, traders, toilers, not retaining gain, liars, not of an amiable disposition, in business or principle true, free-spoken, beneficent, illiterate, deceivers, friendly, careless, to whom it is not profitable to do any act of injustice. They are scorners, scoffers, satirical, illustrious, listeners, and nothing succeeds with these. As regards friendship, useful. Those born in Scorpio are of the following description: a maidenish countenance, comely, pungent, blackish hair, well-shaped eyes, forehead not broad, and sharp nostril, small contracted ears, wrinkled foreheads, narrow eyebrows, drawn cheeks. The same by nature are crafty, sedulous, liars, communicating their particular desires to no one, of a deceitful spirit, wicked, scorners, victims to adultery, well-grown, docile. As regards friendship, useless. Those born in Sagittarius will be of the following description: great length, square forehead, profuse eyebrows, indicative of strength, well-arranged projection of hair, reddish in complexion. The same by nature are gracious, as educated persons, simple, beneficent, given to unnatural lusts, companionable, toil-worn, lovers, beloved, jovial in their cups, clean, passionate, careless, wicked. As regards friendship, useless, scorners, with noble souls, insolent, crafty, for fellowship, useful. Those born in Capricorn will be of the following description: reddish body, projection of grayish hair, round mouth, eyes as of an eagle, contracted brows, open forehead, somewhat bald, in the upper parts of the body endued with more strength, The same by nature are philosophic, scorners, and scoffers at the existing state of things, passionate, persons that can make concessions, honorable, beneficent, lovers of the practice of music, passionate in their cups, mirthful, familiar, talkative, given to unnatural lusts, genial, amiable, quarrelsome lovers, for fellowship well disposed. Those born in Aquarius will be of the following description: square in size, of a diminutive body, sharp, small, fierce eyes, imperious, ungenial, severe, readily making acquisitions, for friendship and fellowship well disposed. Moreover, for maritime enterprises they make voyages and perish. The same by nature are taciturn, modest, sociable, adulterers, penurious, practiced in business, tumultuous, pure, well disposed, honorable, large eyebrows. Frequently they are born in the midst of trifling events, but in after life follow a different pursuit. Though they may have shown kindness to anyone, still no one returns them thanks. Those born in Pisces will be of the following description: of moderate dimensions, pointed forehead, like fishes, shaggy hair. Frequently they become soon gray. The same by nature are of exalted soul, simple, passionate, penurious, talkative. In the first period of life they will be drowsy. They are desirous of managing business by themselves, of high repute, venturesome, emulous, accusers, changing their locality, lovers, dancers, for friendship useful. Since, therefore, we have explained the astonishing wisdom of these men, and have not concealed their overwrought art of divination by means of contemplation, neither shall I be silent as regards undertakings in the case of which those that are deceived act foolishly. For comparing the forms and dispositions of men with names of stars, how impotent their system is! For we know that those originally conversant with such investigations have called the stars by names given in reference to propriety of signification, and facility for future recognition. For what similarity is there of these heavenly bodies with the likeness of animals? Or what community of nature, as regards to conduct and energy? Is there ill the two cases, that one should allege that a person born in Leo should be irascible, and one born in Virgo moderate, and one born in Cancer wicked, but those born...
And the sorcerer, taking a paper, directs the inquirer to write down with water whatever questions he may desire to have asked from the demons. Then, folding up the paper and delivering it to the attendant, he sends him away to commit it to the flames, that the ascending smoke may waft the letters to demons. While, however, the attendant is executing this order, the sorcerer first removes equal portions of the paper, and on some more parts of it he pretends that demons write in Hebrew characters. Then, burning an incense of the Egyptian magicians, termed kuphai, he takes these portions of paper away and places them near the incense. But that paper, which the inquirer happens to have written upon, having placed on the coals, he has burned. Then the sorcerer appearing to be borne away under divine influence, and hurrying into a corner of the house, utters a loud and harsh cry, and unintelligible to all, and orders all those present to enter, crying out at the same time, and invoking Pheron, or some other demon. And after passing into the house, and when those that were present stood side by side, the sorcerer, flinging the attendant upon a bed, utters to him several words, partly in Greek, and partly, as it were, the Hebrew language, embodying the customary incantations employed by the magicians. The attendant, however, goes away to make the inquiry, and within the house, into a vessel full of water, the sorcerer, infusing copperas mixture, and melting the drug, having with it sprinkled the paper that forsooth had the characters on it obliterated, he forces the latent and concealed letters to come once more into the light, and by these he ascertains what the inquirer has written down. And if one write with copperas mixture likewise, and having ground a gallnut, use its vapor as a fumigator, the concealed letters would become plain. And if one write with milk, and then scorch the paper, and scraping it, sprinkle and rub what is thus scraped off upon the letters traced with the milk, these will become plain. And urine likewise, and sauce of brine, and juice of euphorbia, and of a fig produce a similar result. But when the sorcerer has ascertained the question in this mode, he makes provision for the manner in which we ought to give the reply. And next he orders those that are present to enter, holding laurel branches, and shaking them, and utters cries, and invoking the demon Pheron, for also it becomes these to invoke him, and it is worthy that they make this request from demons, which they do not wish of themselves to put forward, having lost their minds. The confused noise, however, and the tumult prevent them directing attention to those things which it is supposed the sorcerer does in secret. And what these are, the present is a fair opportunity for us to declare. Considerable darkness then prevails, for the sorcerer affirms that it is impossible for mortal nature to behold divine things, for that to hold converse with these mysteries is sufficient, making, however, the attendant lie down upon the couch, head foremost, and placing by each side 2 of those little tablets, upon which had been inscribed in forsooth Hebrew characters, as it were names of demons, he says that a demon will deposit the rest in their ears. But this statement is requisite in order that some instrument may be placed beside the ears of the attendant, by which it is possible that he signify everything which he chooses. First, however, he produces a sound that the attendant youth may be terrified, and secondly, he makes a humming noise. Then, thirdly, he speaks through the instrument what he wishes the youth to say, and remains in expectation of the issue of the affair. Next, he makes those present remain still, and directs the attendant to signify what he has heard from the demons. But the instrument that is placed beside his ears is a natural instrument, that is, the windpipe of long-necked cranes, or storks, or swans. And if none of these is at hand, there are also some different artificial instruments employed for certain brass pipes, 10 in number, and fitting into one another, terminating in a narrow point, are adapted for the purpose. And through these is spoken into the ear whatsoever the magician wishes. And the youth, hearing these words with terror as uttered by demons, when ordered, speaks them out. If anyone, however, putting around a stick a moist hide, and having dried it, and drawn it together, close it up, and by removing the rod, fashion the hide into the form of a pipe, he attains a similar end. Should any of these, however, be not at hand, he takes a book, and opening it inside, stretches it out as far as he think requisite, and thus achieves the same result. But if he knows beforehand that one is present who is about to ask a question, he is the more ready for all contingencies. If, however, he may also previously ascertain the question, he writes it with the drug, and as being prepared, he is considered more skillful on account of having clearly written out what is about to be asked. If, however, he is ignorant of the question, he forms conjectures, and puts forth something capable of a doubtful and varied interpretation, in order that the oracular response, being originally unintelligible, may serve for numerous purposes, and in the issue of events the prediction may be considered correspondent with what actually occurs. Next, having filled a vessel with water, he puts down into it the paper, as if uninscribed, and the same time infusing along with it copperas mixture. For in this way the paper written upon floats upward to the surface, bearing the response. Accordingly, there ensue frequently to the attendant formidable fancies, for also he strikes blows plentifully on the terrified bystanders. For casting incense into the fire, he again operates after the following method: covering a lump of what are called fossil salts with Etruscan wax, and dividing the piece itself of incense into 2 parts, he throws in a grain of salt, and again joining the piece together, and placing it on the burning coals, he leaves it there. And when this is consumed, the salts, bounding upwards, create the impression of, as it were, a strange vision taking place, and the dark blue dye, which has been deposited in the incense, produces a blood-red flame, as we have already declared. But the sorcerer makes a scarlet liquid by mixing wax with alkanet, and, as I said, depositing the wax in the incense, and he makes the coals be moved, placing underneath powdered alum, and when this is dissolved and swells up like bubbles, the coals are moved. But different eggs they display after this manner, perforating the top at both ends, and extracting the white, and having again dipped it, throw in some minium and some writing ink. Close, however, the openings with refined scrapings of the eggs, smearing them with fig juice. By those who cause sheep to cut off their own heads, the following plan is adopted: secretly smearing the throat of the animal with a cauterized drug, he places a sword near, and leaves it there. The sheep, desirous of scratching himself, rushes against the blade, and in the act of rubbing is slaughtered, while the head is almost severed from the trunk. There is, however, a compound of the drug, bryony, and salt and squills, made up in equal parts. In order that the person bringing the drug may escape notice, he carries a box with 2 compartments constructed of horn, the visible one of which contains frankincense, but the second one the aforesaid drug. He, however, likewise insinuates into the ears of the sheep about to meet death quicksilver, but this is a poisonous drug. And if one
smears the ears of goats over with cerate, they say that they expire a little afterwards, by having their breathing obstructed, for this to them is the way, as these affirm, of their drawing their breath in an act of respiration. And a ram, they assert, dies if one bends back its neck opposite the sun. And they accomplish the burning of a house by dabbing it over with the juice of a certain fish called dactylus, and this effect, which it has by reason of the salt water, is very useful. Likewise, foam of the ocean is boiled in an earthen jar along with some sweet ingredients, and if you apply a lighted candle to this while in a seething state, it catches the fire and is consumed, and yet, though the mixture be poured upon the head, it does not burn it at all. If, however, you also smear it over with heated resin, it is consumed far more effectually. But he accomplishes his object better still if he also takes some sulfur. Thunder is produced in many ways. For stones, very numerous and unusually large, being rolled downward along wooden planks, fall upon plates of brass, and cause a sound similar to thunder. And also, around the thin plank, with which carders thicken cloth, they coil a thin rope, and then drawing away the cord with a whiff, they spin the plank round, and in its revolution it emits a sound like thunder. These farces verily are played off thus. There are, however, other practices which I shall explain, which those who execute these ludicrous performances estimate as great exploits. Placing a cauldron full of pitch upon burning coals, when it boils up, though laying their hands down upon it, they are not burned. Nay, even while walking on coals of fire with naked feet, they are not scorched. But also, setting a pyramid of stone on a hearth, the sorcerer makes it get on fire, and from the mouth it disgorges a volume of smoke, and that of a fiery description. Then also, putting a linen cloth upon a pot of water, throwing on at the same time a quantity of blazing coals, the magician keeps the linen cloth unconsumed. Creating also darkness in the house, the sorcerer alleges that he can introduce gods or demons, and if any requires him to show Aesculapius, he uses an invocation couched in the following words. The child once slain again of Phobos deathless made, I call to come and aid my sacrificial rites. Who also once the countless tribes of fleeting dead, in ever mournful homes of Tartarus wide, the fatal billow breasting, in the inky flood surmounting, where all of mortal mould must float, torn beside the lake with endless grief and woe, yourself snatched from gloomy Proserpine, or whether the seat of holy Thrace you haunt, or lovely Pergamos, or besides Ionian Eupadaros, the chief of seers, O happy God, invites you here. But after he discontinues uttering these jests, a fiery Aesculapius appears on the floor. Then, placing in the midst a pot full of water, he invokes all the deities, and they are present, for anyone who is by, glancing into the pot, will behold them all. And Diana leading on her baying hounds. We shall not, however, shrink from narrating the account of the devices of these men, how they attempt to accomplish their jugglery. For the magician lays his hand upon the cauldron of pitch, which is in, as it were, a boiling state, and throwing in at the same time vinegar and nitre and moist pitch, he kindles a fire beneath the cauldron. The vinegar, however, being mixed along with the nitre, on receiving a small accession of heat, moves the pitch so as to cause bubbles to rise to the surface, and afford the mere semblance of a seething pot. The sorcerer, however, previously washes his hands frequently in brine, the consequence being that the contents of the cauldron do not in any wise, though in reality boiling, burn him very much. But if having smeared his hands with a tincture of myrtle and nitre and myrrh, along with vinegar, he wash them in brine frequently, he is not scorched, and he does not burn his feet, provided he smear them with isinglass and a salamander. As regards, however, the burning like a taper of the pyramid, though composed of stone, the cause of this is the following. Chalky earth is fashioned into the shape of a pyramid, but its color is that of a milk-white stone, and it is prepared after this fashion, having anointed the piece of clay with plenty of oil, and put it upon coals and baked it, by smearing it afresh and scorching it a second and third time, and frequently the sorcerer contrives that it can be burned, even though he should plunge it in water, for it contains in itself abundance of oil. The hearth, however, is spontaneously kindled, while the magician pours out a libation by having lime instead of ashes burning underneath, and refined frankincense, and a large quantity of tallow, and a bundle of anointed tapers, and of gall-nuts hollowed within, and supplied with concealed fire. And after some delay, the sorcerer makes the pyramid emit smoke from the mouth, by both putting fire in the gall-nut and encircling it with tallow, and blowing into the mouth. The linen cloth, however, that has been placed round the cauldron, and on which he deposits the coals, on account of the underlying brine, would not be burned. Besides, that it has itself been washed in brine, and then smeared with the white of an egg, along with moist alum. And if likewise one mix these, the juice of house leek, along with vinegar, and for a long time previously smear it with this preparation, after being washed in this drug, it continues altogether fire-proof. After then, we have succinctly explained the powers of the secret arts practiced among these magicians, and have shown their easy plan for the acquisition of knowledge. Neither are we disposed to be silent on the following point, which is a necessary one, how that, loosing the seals, they restore the sealed letters with the actual seals themselves, melting pitch, resin, and sulfur, and moreover asphalt, in equal parts, and forming the ointment into a figure, they keep it by them. When, however, it is time to loose a small tablet, smearing with oil their tongue, next with the latter anointing the seal, and heating the drug with a moderate fire. The sorcerers place it upon the seal, and they leave it there until it has acquired complete consistence, and they use it in this condition as a seal. But they say likewise that wax itself with fir-wood gum possesses a similar potency, as well as 2 parts of mastic with 1 part of dry asphalt. But sulfur also by itself effects the purpose tolerably well, and flour of gypsum strained with water, and of gum. Now this last mixture certainly answers most admirably also for sealing molten lead, and that which is accomplished by the Tuscan wax, and refuse of resin, and pitch, and asphalt, and mastic, and powdered spar, all being boiled together in equal parts, is superior to the rest of the drugs which I have mentioned, while that which is effected by the gum is not inferior. In this manner then also they attempt to loose the seals, endeavoring to learn the letters written within. These contrivances, however, I hesitated to narrate in this book, perceiving the danger lest perchance any knavish person, taking occasion from my account, should attempt to practice these juggleries. Solicitude, however, for many young persons who could be preserved from such practices has persuaded me to teach and publish, for security's sake, the foregoing statements. For although one person may make use of these for gaining instruction in evil, in this way somebody else will, being instructed in these practices, be preserved from them. And the magicians themselves, corrupters of life, will be ashamed in plying their art. And learning these points that have been previously elucidated by us, they will possibly be restrained from their folly. But that this seal may not be broken, let me seal it with hog's lard and hair mixed with wax. But neither shall I be silent respecting that piece of knavery of these sorcerers which consists in the divination by means of the cauldron. For making a closed chamber and anointing the ceiling with cyanus for present use, they introduce certain vessels of cyanus and stretch them upwards. The cauldron, however, full of water, is placed in the middle of the ground, and the reflection of the cyanus falling upon it presents the appearance of heaven. But the floor also has a certain concealed aperture, on which the cauldron is laid, having been previously supplied with a bottom of crystal, while itself is composed of stone. Underneath, however, unnoticed by the spectators, is a compartment into which the accomplices assembling appear invested with the figures of such gods and demons as the magician wishes to exhibit. Now the dupe, beholding these, becomes astonished at the knavery of the magician, and subsequently believes all things that are likely to be stated by him. But the sorcerer produces a burning demon by tracing on the wall whatever figure he wishes, and then covertly smearing it with a drug mixed according to this manner, that is to say, of Laconian and Zicinthian asphalt, while next, as if under the influence of prophetic frenzy, he moves the lamp towards the wall. The drug, however, is burned with considerable splendor, and that a fiery Hecate seems to career through air, he contrives in the mode following. Concealing a certain accomplice in a place which he wishes, and taking aside his dupes, he persuades them to believe himself, alleging that he will exhibit a flaming demon riding through the air. Now he exhorts them immediately to keep their eyes fixed until they see the flame in the air, and that then, veiling themselves, they should fall on their face until he himself should call them. And after having given them these instructions, he, on a moonless night, in verses, speaks thus: Infernal and earthly and supernal Bombo, come, saint of streets and brilliant one that strays by night, foe of radiance, but friend and mate of gloom, in howl of dogs rejoicing in crimson gore, wading mid corpses through tombs of lifeless dust, panting for blood, with fear convulsing men, Gorgo and Mormo and Luna, and of many shapes, come propitious to our sacrificial rites. And while speaking these words, fire is seen borne through the air, but the spectators, being horrified at the strange apparition and covering their eyes, fling themselves speechless to earth. But the success of the artifice is enhanced by the following contrivance. The accomplice, whom I have spoken of as being concealed, when he hears the incantation ceasing, holding a kite or hawk enveloped with tow, sets fire to it, and releases it. The bird, however, frightened by the flame, is borne aloft, and makes a proportionately quicker flight, which these deluded persons beholding conceal themselves, as if they had seen something divine. The winged creature, however, being whirled round by the fire, is borne wherever chance may have it, and burns now the houses, and now the courtyards. Such is the divination of the sorcerers. And they make moon and stars appear on the ceiling after this manner. In the central part of the ceiling, having fastened a mirror, placing a dish full of water equally with the mirror in the central portion of the floor, and setting in a central place likewise a candle, emitting a faint light from a higher position than the dish. In this way, by reflection, the magician causes the moon to appear by the mirror. But frequently also they suspend on high from the ceiling at a distance a drum, by which, being covered with some garment, is concealed by the accomplice, in order that the heavenly body may not appear before the proper time. And afterwards, placing a candle within the drum, when the magician gives the signal to the accomplice, he removes so much of the covering as may be sufficient for effecting an imitation representing the figure of the moon, as it is at that particular time. He smears, however, the luminous parts of the drum with cinnabar and gum, and having paired around the neck and bottom of a flagon of glass ready behind, he puts a candle in it, and places around it some of the requisite contrivances for making the figures shine, which some one of the accomplices has concealed on high, and on receiving the signal, he throws down from above the contrivances, so to make the moon appear descending from the sky. And the same result is achieved by means of a jar in sylvan localities, for it is by means of a jar that the tricks in a house are performed. For having set up an altar, subsequently is placed upon it the jar, having a lighted lamp. When, however, there are a greater number of lamps, no such sight is displayed. After then, the enchanter invokes the moon. He orders all the lights to be extinguished, yet that one may be left faintly burning. And then the light, that which streams from the jar, is reflected on the ceiling, and furnishes to those present a representation of the moon. The mouth of the jar being kept covered for the time which it would seem to require, in order that the representation of full moon should be exhibited on the ceiling. But the scales of fishes, for instance, the seahorse, cause the stars to appear to be, the scales being steeped in a mixture of water and gum, and fastened on the ceiling at intervals. The sensation of an earthquake they cause in such a way, as that all things seem set in motion. Ordure of a weasel burned with a magnet upon coals has this effect. And they exhibit a liver seemingly bearing an inscription in this manner. With the left hand he writes what he wishes, appending it to the question, and the letters are traced with gall juice and strong vinegar. Then, taking up the liver, retaining it in the left hand, he makes some delay, and then draws away the impression, and it is supposed to have, as it were, writing upon it. But putting a skull on the ground, they make it speak in this manner. The skull itself is made out of the caul of an ox, and when fashioned into the requisite figure, by means of Etruscan wax and prepared gum, and when this membrane is placed around, it presents the appearance of a skull, which seems to all to speak when the contrivance operates in the same manner as we have explained in the case of the attendant youths, when having procured the windpipe of a crane, or some such long-necked animal, and attaching it covertly to the skull, the accomplice utters what he wishes, and when he desires the skull to become invisible, he appears as if burning incense, placing around for this purpose a quantity of coals, and when the wax catches the heat of these, it melts, and in this way the skull is supposed to become invisible. These are the deeds of the magicians, and innumerable other such tricks there are which work on the credulity of the dupes, by fair balanced words and the appearance of plausible acts. And the heresiarchs, astonished at the art of these sorcerers, have imitated them, partly by delivering their doctrines in secrecy and darkness, and partly by advancing these tenets as their own. For this reason, being desirous of warning the multitude, we have been the more painstaking in order not to omit any expedient practiced by the magicians, for those who may be disposed to be deceived. We have been, however, drawn, not unreasonably, into a detail of some of the secret mysteries of the sorcerers, which are not very requisite, to be sure, in reference to the subject taken in hand, yet for the purpose of guarding against the villainous and incoherent art of the magicians, may be supposed useful. Since, therefore, as far as delineation is feasible, we have explained the opinions of all speculators, exerting special attention toward the elucidation of the opinions introduced as novelties by the heresiarchs, opinions which, as far as piety is concerned, are futile and spurious, and which are not, even among themselves, perhaps deemed worthy of serious consideration. Having pursued this course of inquiry, it seems expedient that, by means of a compendious discourse, we should recall to the reader's memory statements that have been previously made. Among all those who, throughout the earth, as philosophers and theologians, have carried on investigations, has prevailed diversity of opinion concerning the deity as to his essence or nature. For some affirm him to be fire, and some spirit, and some water, while others say that he is earth, and each of the elements labors under some deficiency, and one is worsted by the other. To the wise men of the world, this, however, has occurred, which is obvious to persons possessing intelligence. I mean that, beholding the stupendous works of creation, they were confused respecting the substance of existing things, supposing that these were too vast to admit of deriving generation from another, and at the same time asserting that neither the universe itself is God. As far as theology was concerned, they declared, however, a single cause for things that fall under the cognizance of vision, each supposing the cause which he adjudged the most reasonable. And so, when gazing on the objects made by God, and on those which are the most insignificant in comparison with his overpowering majesty, not, however, being able to extend the mind to the magnitude of God as he really is, they deified these works
of the external world. But the Persians, supposing that they had penetrated more within the confines of the truth, asserted that the deity is luminous, a light contained in air. The Babylonians, however, affirmed that the deity is dark, which very opinion also appears the consequence of the other. For day follows night, and night day. Do not the Egyptians, however, who suppose themselves more ancient than all, speak of the power of the deity? This power they estimate by calculating these intervals of the parts of the zodiac, and as if by a most divine inspiration they asserted that the deity is an indivisible monad, both itself generating itself, and that out of this were formed all things. For this, say they, being unbegotten, produces the succeeding numbers. For instance, the monad, superadded into itself, generates the duad, and in like manner, when superadded into duad, triad, and so forth, produces the triad and tetrad up to the decad, which is the beginning and end of numbers. Wherefore it is that the first and 10th monad is generated on account of the decade being equipollent and being reckoned for a monad, and because this multiplied 10 times will become 100, and again becomes a monad, and the 100 multiplied 10 times will produce 1,000, and this will be a monad. In this manner also, the 1,000 multiplied 10 times make up the full sum of a myriad. In like manner will it be a monad. But by a comparison of indivisible quantities, the kindred numbers of the monad comprehend 3, 5, 7, 9. There is also, however, a more natural relation of a different number to the monad, according to the arrangement of the orbit of 6 days' duration, that is, of the duad, according to the position and division of even numbers. But the kindred number is 4 and 8. These, however, taking from the monad of the numbers an idea of virtue, progressed up to the 4 elements. I allude, of course, to spirit and fire and water and earth. And out of these, having made the world, God framed it an hermaphrodite, and allocated 2 elements for the upper hemisphere, namely spirit and fire, and this is styled the hemisphere of the monad, a hemisphere beneficent and ascending, and masculine. For being composed of small particles, the monad soars into the most rarefied and purest part of the atmosphere, and the other 2 elements, earth and water, being more gross, he assigned to the duad, and this is termed the descending hemisphere, both feminine and mischievous. And likewise again, the upper elements themselves, when compared one with another, comprise in one another both male and female, for fruitfulness and increase of the whole creation. And the fire is masculine, and the spirit feminine, and again the water is masculine, and the earth feminine. And so from the beginning fire consorted with spirit, and water with earth. For as the power of spirit is fire, so also that of earth is water. And the elements themselves, when computed and resolved by subtraction of enneads, terminate improperly, some of them in the masculine number, and others of them in the feminine. And again, the Ennead is subtracted for this cause, because the 360 parts of the entire circle consist of Enneads. And for this reason, the 4 regions of the world are circumscribed by 90 perfect parts. The light has been appropriated to the monad, and darkness to the duad, and life to light according to nature, and death to the duad. And to life has been appropriated justice, and to death injustice. Wherefore everything generated among masculine numbers is beneficent, while that produced among feminine numbers is mischievous. For instance, they pursue their calculations thus: monad, that we may commence from this, becomes 361, which numbers terminated in a monad by the subtraction of the Ennead. In like manner, reckon thus: duad becomes 605. Take away the Enneads, it ends in a duad, and each reverts into its own peculiar function. For the monad, therefore, as being beneficent, they assert that there are consequently names ascending, and beneficent and masculine, and carefully observed, terminating in an uneven number, whereas that those terminating in the even number have been supposed to be both descending and feminine and malicious. For they affirm that nature is made up of contraries, namely bad and good, as right and left, light and darkness, night and day, life and death. And moreover, they make this assertion, that they have calculated the word deity, and found that it reverts into a pentad, with an Ennead subtracted. Now this name is an even number, and when it is written down on some material, they attach it to the body, and accomplish cures by it. In this manner likewise, a certain herb terminating in this number, being similarly fashioned around the frame, operates by reason of a similar calculation of the number. Nay, even a doctor cures sickly people by a similar calculation. If, however, the calculation is contrary, it does not heal with facility. Persons attending to these numbers reckon as many as are homogeneous according to this principle. Some, however, according to vowels alone, whereas others according to the entire number. Such also is the wisdom of the Egyptians, by which, as they boast, they suppose that they cognize the divine nature. It appears, then, that these speculations also have been sufficiently explained by us. But since I think that I have omitted no opinion found in this earthly and groveling wisdom, I perceive that the solicitude expended by us on these subjects has not been useless. For we observe that our discourse has been serviceable not only for a refutation of heresies, but also in reference to those who entertain these opinions. Now these, when they encounter the extreme care evinced by us, will even be struck with admiration of our earnestness, and will not despise our industry and condemn Christians as fools when they discern the opinions to which they find themselves have stupidly accorded their belief. And furthermore, those who, desirous of learning, addict themselves to the truth, will be assisted by our discourse to become, when they have learned the fundamental principles of the heresies, more intelligent, not only for the easy refutation of those who have attempted to deceive them, but that also when they have ascertained the avowed opinions of the wise men, and have been made acquainted with them, that they shall neither be confused by them, as ignorant persons would, nor become the dupes of certain individuals acting as if from some authority. Nay, more than this, they shall be on their guard against those that are allowing themselves to become victims to these delusions. Having sufficiently explained these opinions, let us next pass on to a consideration of the subject taken in hand, in order that by proving what we have determined concerning heresies, and by compelling their champions to return to these several speculators their peculiar tenets, we may show the heresiarchs destitute of a system, and by proclaiming the folly of those who are persuaded by these heterodox tenets, we shall prevail on them to retrace their course to the serene haven of the truth. In order, however, that the statements about to follow may seem more clear to the readers, it is expedient also to declare the opinions advanced by Aratus concerning the disposition of the stars of the heavens. And this is necessary, inasmuch as some persons, assimilating these doctrines to those declared by the Scriptures, convert the holy writings into allegories, and endeavor to seduce the mind of those who give heed to their tenets, drawing them on by plausible words into the admission of whatever opinions they wish, and exhibiting a strange marvel, as if the assertions made by them were fixed among the stars. They, however, gazing intently on the very extraordinary wonder, admirers as they are of trifles, are fascinated like a bird called the owl, which example it is proper to mention, on account of the statements which are about to follow. The animal I speak of is, however, not very different from an eagle, either in size or figure, and it is captured in the following way. The hunter of these birds, when he sees a flock of them lighting anywhere, shaking his hands at a distance, pretends to dance, and so little by little draws near the birds. But they, struck with amazement at the strange sight, are rendered unobservant of everything passing around them. But others of the party, who have come into the country equipped for such a purpose, coming from behind upon the birds, easily lay hold on them as they are gazing on the dancer. Wherefore I desire that no one, astonished by similar wonders of those who interpret the aspect of heaven, should, like the owl, be taken captive. For the knavery practiced by such speculators may be considered dancing and silliness, but not truth. Aratus, therefore, expresses himself thus: Just as many are they, here and there they roll, day by day over heaven, endless, every star, yet this declines not even little, but thus exactly, ever remains with axis fixed and poised in every part, holds earth midway, and heaven itself around conducts. Aratus says that there are in the sky revolving, that is, gyrating stars, because from east to west and west to east they journey perpetually, and
in an orbicular figure. And he says that there revolves towards the bears themselves, like some stream of a river, an enormous and prodigious monster, the serpent, and that this is what the devil says in the book of Job to the deity, when Satan uses these words, "I have traversed earth under heaven and have gone around it." That is, that I have been turned around, and thereby have been able to survey the worlds. For they suppose that towards the North Pole is situated the dragon, the serpent, from the highest pole, looking upon all the objects, and gazing on all the works of creation, in order that nothing of the things that are being made may escape his notice. For though all the stars in the firmament set, the pole of this luminary alone never sets, but careering high above the horizon, surveys and beholds all things, and none of the works of creation, he says, can escape his notice. Where chiefly settings mingle and risings one with other. Here Aratus says that the head of this constellation is placed, for towards the west and the east of the two hemispheres is situated the head of the dragon, in order, he says, that nothing may escape his notice throughout the same quartet, either of objects in the west or those in the east, but that the beast may know all things at the same time. And near the head itself of the dragon is the appearance of a man, conspicuous by means of the stars, which Aratus styles a wearied image, and like one oppressed with labor, and he is denominated Engonesis. Aratus then affirms that he does not know what this toil is, and what this prodigy is that revolves in heaven. The heretics, however, wishing by means of this account of the stars to establish their own doctrines, and with more than ordinary earnestness devoting their attention to these astronomic systems, assert that Engonesis is Adam, according to the commandment of God, as Moses declared, guarding the head of the dragon, and the dragon guarding his heel. For so Aratus expresses himself, the right foot's track of the dragon fierce possessing. And Aratus says that the constellations Lyra and Corona have been placed on both sides near him, now I mean Engonesis, but that he bends the knee and stretches forth both hands as if making a confession of sin, and that the lyre is a musical instrument fashioned by Logos while still altogether an infant, and that Logos is the same as he who is denominated Mercury among the Greeks, and Aratus, with regard to the constellation of the lyre, observes, then further also near the cradle Hermes pierced it through, and said, call it lyre. It consists of 7 strings, signifying by these 7 strings the entire harmony and construction of the world as it is melodiously constituted. For in 6 days the world was made, and the Creator rested on the 7th. If then, says Aratus, Adam, acknowledging his guilt and guarding the head of the beast, according to the commandment of the deity, will imitate Lyra, that is, obey the Logos of God, that is, submit to the law, he will receive corona, that is situated near him. If, however, he neglect his duty, he shall be hurled downwards, in company with the beast that lies underneath, and shall have, he says, his portion with the beast. And Angonasus seems on both sides to extend his hands, and on one to touch Lyra, and on the other Corona, and this is his confession, so that it is possible to distinguish him by means of this sidereal configuration itself. But Corona, nevertheless, is plotted against, and forcibly drawn away by another beast, a smaller dragon, which is the offspring of him who is guarded by the foot of Angonasus. A man also stands, firmly grasping with both hands and dragging towards the space behind the serpent from Corona, and he does not permit the beast to touch Corona, though making a violent effort to do so. And Aeretus styles him Anguitenens, because he restrains the impetuosity of the serpent in his attempt to reach Corona. But Logos, he says, is he who, in the figure of a man, hinders the beast from reaching Corona, commiserating him who is being plotted against by the dragon and his offspring simultaneously. These constellations, the bears, however, he says, are 2 hebdomads composed of 7 stars, images of 2 creations. For the first creation, he affirms, is that according to Adam in labors. This is he who is seen on his knees, Angonasis. The second creation, however, is that according to Christ, by which we are regenerated, and this Anguitenens, who struggles against the beast and hinders him from reaching Corona, which is reserved for the man. But the great bear is, he says, Helike, symbol of a mighty world towards which the Greeks steer their course, that is, for which they are being disciplined, and wafted by the waves of life they follow onwards, having in prospect some such revolving world, or discipline, or wisdom, which conducts those back that follow in pursuit of such a world. For the term helike seems to signify a certain circling and revolution towards the same points. There is likewise a certain other small bear, Sinos Urus, as it were some image of the second creation, that formed according to God. For few, he says, there are that journey by the narrow path, but they assert that Sino Urus is narrow, towards which Aeretus says that the Sidonians navigate. But Aeretus has spoken partly of the Sidonians, but means the Phoenicians, on account of the existence of the admirable wisdom of the Phoenicians. The Greeks, however, assert that they are Phoenicians who have migrated from the shores of the Red Sea into this country, where they even at present dwell. For this is the opinion of Herodotus. Now, Sinos Ura, he says, is this lesser bear, the second creation, the one of limited dimensions, the narrow way, and not helike. For he does not lead them back, but guides forward by a straight path, those that follow him being the tail of Canis. For Canis is the Logos, partly guarding and preserving the flock that is plotted against by the wolves, and partly like a dog, hunting the beasts from the creation and destroying them, and partly producing all things, and being what they express by the name Sion, Canis, that is, generator. Hence it is said, Aratus has spoken of the rising of Canis, expressing himself thus: when, however, Canis has risen, no longer do the crops miss. This is what he says. Plants that have been put into the earth up to the period of Canis rising, frequently, though not having struck root, are yet covered with a profusion of leaves, and afford indications to spectators that they will be productive, and that they appear full of life, though in reality not having vitality in themselves from the root. But when the rising of Canis takes place, the living are separated from the dead by Canis, for whatsoever plants have not taken root really undergo putrefaction. This Canis, therefore, he says, as being a certain divine Logos, has been appointed judge of quick and dead, and, as the influence of Canis is observable in the vegetable productions of this world, so in plants of celestial growth in men is beheld the power of the Logos. From some such cause, then, Cynos Ora, the second creation, is set in the firmament as an image of a creation by the Logos. The dragon, however, in the center reclines between the two creations, preventing a transition of whatever things are from the great creation to the small creation, and in guarding those that are fixed in the great creation, as for instance Engonasus, observing at the same time how and in what manner each is constituted in the small creation, and the dragon himself is watched at the head. He says by Angoutinens, this image, he affirms, is fixed in heaven, being a certain wisdom to those capable of discerning it. If, however, this is obscure by means of some other image, he says the creation teaches men to philosophize, in regard which Aratus has expressed himself thus: neither of Cepheus Yacidus are we the wretched brood. But Aratus says, near this constellation is Cepheus, and Cassiopeia, and Andromeda, and Perseus, great lineaments of the creation to those who are able to discern them, for he asserts that Cepheus is Adam, Cassiopeia Eve, Andromeda the soul of both of these, Perseus the Logos, winged offspring of Jove, and Cetos the plotting monster. Not to any of these, but to Andromeda only does he repair, who slays the beast, from whom likewise taking unto himself Andromeda, who had been delivered and chained to the beast, the Logos, that is Perseus, achieves, he says, her liberation. Perseus, however, is the winged axle that pierces both poles through the center of the earth, and turns the world round. The spirit also, that which is in the world, is symbolized by Cycnus, a bird, a musical animal near the bears, type of the divine spirit, because that, when it approaches the end itself of life, it alone is fitted by nature to sing on departing with good hope from the wicked creation, and offering up hymns unto God. But crabs and bulls and lions and rams and goats and kids and as many other beasts as have their names used for denominating the stars in the firmament are, he says, images and exemplars from which the creation, subject to change, obtaining the different species, becomes replete with animals of this description. Employing these accounts, the heretics think to deceive as many of these as devote themselves over sedulously to the astrologers, from thence striving to construct a system of religion that is widely divergent from the thoughts of these speculators. Wherefore, beloved, let us avoid the habit of admiring trifles, secured by which the bird, styled the owl, is captured. For these and other such speculations are, as it were, dancing, and not truth. For neither do the stars yield these points of information, but men of their own accord, for the designation of certain stars, thus called them by names, in order that they might become to them easily distinguishable. For what similarity with a bear, or a lion, or kid, or waterman, or Cepheus, or Andromeda, or spectres that have names given them in Hades, have the stars that are scattered over the firmament? For we must remember that these men and the titles themselves came into existence long after the origin of man. What, I say, is in common between the two, that the heretics, astonished at the marvel, should thus strive, by means of such discourses, to strengthen their own opinions? But since almost every heresy that has sprung up through the arithmetical art has discovered measures of heptamedes and certain projections of aeons, each rending the art differently, while whatever variation prevailed was in the names merely. And since Pythagoras became the instructor of these, first instructing numbers of this sort among the Greeks from Egypt, it seems expedient not to omit even this. But after we have given a compendious elucidation, to approach the demonstration of those things that we propose to investigate. Arithmeticians and geometers arose, to whom especially Pythagoras first seems to have furnished principles, and from numbers that can continually progress ad infinitum by multiplication, and from figures, these derived their first principles as capable of being discerned by reason alone. For a principle of geometry, as one may perceive, is an indivisible point. From that point, however, by means of the art, the generation of endless figures from the point is discovered. For the point being drawn into length becomes a line, after being thus continued having a point for its extremity, and a line flowing out into breadth begets a surface, and the limits of the surface are lines. But a surface flowing out into breadth becomes body, and when what is solid has in this manner derived existence from altogether the smallest point, the nature of a huge body is constituted, and this is what Simon expresses thus: the little will be great, being as a point, and the great illimitable. Now this coincides with the geometrical doctrine of a point. But of the arithmetical art, which by composition contains philosophy, number became a first principle, which is an indefinable and incomprehensible entity, comprising in itself all the numbers that can go on ad infinitum by aggregation. But the first monad became a principle according to substance of the numbers, which principle is a male monad, procreating paternally all the rest of the numbers. Secondly, the duad is a female number, which by the arithmeticians is also itself denominated even. Thirdly, the triad is a male number. This also it has been the usual custom of arithmeticians to style odd. In addition to all these, the tetrad is a female number, and this same, because it is feminine, is likewise denominated even. All the numbers, therefore, taken generically, are 4. Number, however, as regards genus, is indefinite, from which, according to their system, is formed the perfect number, I mean the decade. For 1, 2, 3, 4 become 10, as has been previously proved, if the proper denomination be preserved according to substance for each of the numbers. This is the sacred quaternion according to Pythagoras, having in itself roots of an endless nature, that is, all other numbers. For 11 and 12 and the rest derive the principle of generation from the 10. Of this decade, the perfect number, there are called 4 parts: number, monad, power, cube, whose connections and mixtures take place for the generation of increase, according to nature, completing the productive number. For when the square is multiplied into itself, it becomes a biquadratic. But when the square is multiplied into a cube, it becomes the product of a quadratic and cube. But when a cube is multiplied into a cube, it becomes the product of cube multiplied by cube. Wherefore, all the numbers are 7, so that the generation of things produced may be from the hebdomad, which is number, monad, power, cube, biquadratic, product of quadratic multiplied by cube, product of cube multiplied by cube. Of this hebdomad, Simon and Valentinus, having altered the names, detailed marvelous stories, from thence hastily adopting a system for themselves. For Simon employs his denominations thus: mind, intelligence, name, voice, ratiocination, reflection, and he who stood, stands, will stand. And Valentinus enumerates them thus: mind, truth, word, life, man, church, and the Father, reckoned along with these, according to the same principles as those advanced by the cultivators of arithmetical philosophy. And heresiarchs, admiring, as if unknown to the multitude, this philosophy, and following it, have framed heterodox doctrines devised by themselves. Some, indeed, then attempt likewise to form the heptamedes from the medical art, being astonished at the dissection of the brain, asserting that the substance of the universe and the power of procreation and the Godhead could be ascertained from the arrangement of the brain. For the brain, being the dominant portion of the entire body, reposes calm and unmoved, containing within itself the spirit. Such an account, then, is not incredible, but widely differs from the conclusions which these heretics attempt to deduce from it. For the brain, on being dissected, has within it what may be called a vaulted chamber, and on either side of this are thin membranes, which they term little wings. Now these are gently moved by the spirit, and in turn propel towards the cerebellum the spirit, which, careering through a certain blood vessel like a reed, advances towards the pineal gland, and near this is situated the entrance of the cerebellum, which admits the current of spirit, and distributes it into what is styled the spinal marrow. But from them the whole frame participates in the spiritual energy, inasmuch as all the arteries, like a branch, are fastened on from this blood vessel, the extremity of which terminates in the genital blood vessels, whence all the animal seeds proceeding from the brain through the loin are secreted in the seminal glands. The form, however, of the brain is like the head of a serpent, respecting which a lengthened discussion is maintained by the professors of knowledge, falsely so named, as we shall prove. 6 other coupling ligaments grow out of the brain, which, traversing round the head and having their termination in the head itself, hold bodies together, but the 7th ligament proceeds from the cerebellum to the lower parts of the rest of the frame, as we have declared. And respecting this, there is an enlarged discussion, whence both Simon and Valentinus will be found both to have derived from this source starting points for their opinions, and, though they may not acknowledge it, to be in the first instance liars, then heretics. Since, then, it appears that we have sufficiently explained these tenets likewise, and that all the reputed opinions of this earthly philosophy have been comprised in 4 books, it seems expedient to proceed to a consideration of the disciples of these men, nay, rather those who have furtively appropriated their doctrines.